Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of What Are You Going to Do With That? The podcast of the Minerva Center for the Rule of Law under extreme conditions at the University of Haifa. My name is Dani, I'm a PhD candidate, and today's guest is from my home country, which means that this time I will pronounce her name correctly, which is Dr. Renske de Kleijn. Before I tell you all about her, let me remind you that we are very active on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you want to know more about our guests and their research, or have comments for us, we'd love to hear from you. Look us up by searching for What to Do With That, or with the @ symbol, What to Do With That, where the 2 is spelled with the number 2. And as I said, today I'm chatting with Dr. Renske de Kleijn. Renske started preparatory training in acting for 1 year in Utrecht and then moved on to a BA at Utrecht University in musicology. She finished the degree with a very high grade and managed to publish 2 articles. This was all before starting her MA at the same university, but she moved from humanities to social sciences with the research master in educational science. She combined her master thesis with the first year of her PhD project on the topic of master thesis supervision. Now, this is a topic every student should be interested in. And if you are, I'd recommend following her account on Twitter with the name Happy PhD Supervisor, or HPHDS, to stay informed about supervision practices and get some positive vibe. Renske's PhD program was also at Utrecht University, at the Center for Teaching and Learning. There she's also been an educational consultant and following the PhD an assistant professor, before moving on to the University Medical Center of Utrecht, where she currently works as an assistant professor. In this setting, Renske focuses on feedback within the medical system, so patients to doctors and nurses to doctors. She has quite a few publications on her name, which can be found in journals such as Assessment and Evaluation Higher Education and Computers and Education. Her current interests also lie in what's called toxic PIs and how to be a good supervisor. I have to mention here that she didn't leave music when she started a research master. Renske has been a children's choir conductor all the way through her studies. And I found out that she also did not drop her creativity altogether when she went into science, as she has just published her first children's book called Als het virus straks voorbij is, which translates to When the Virus Will Be Behind Us, of which the first round is already sold out. But don't worry, the next round is on its way. So welcome Renske, I'm very happy to have you here with me today, especially because we basically grew up in the same area. I'm originally from Vught, also in Brabant, so it's a real coincidence. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Oh wow, that's such a coincidence. That's even like 10 kilometers only, so that we've been really close at some point. So I'm doing good. There was a tough week last week, but I regained my energy and I'm now really looking forward to our conversation because I really like following your channel as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Did you bring a drink with you for today?
Yes, I did. And to stay in the spheres of your home country and this region, I brought a Heineken beer, of which there's a brewery here in 's-Hertogenbosch. But I have to admit, it is a 0.01, because drinking and working do not go very well hand in hand in my case.
It is a struggle sometimes. It sometimes also makes me a little bit lightheaded, but it helps me with the conversation every now and then.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I got my Disaronno right here, and I'm also
nice.
going to pour myself one right now.
Yeah, I'm going to open it, my can.
Oh, that sounds good.
I look forward to doing this.
Nice. Let me close this up before we can cheer.
Yes.
All right. Proost.
Yeah, proost. Cheers.
Okay, are you ready for a few short questions now?
Yeah, bring them on.
Perfect. What is your favorite time of the day and why?
I'm really a morning kind of person. So I usually, so that would be the morning. And since 4 years, I'm a proud mother. But now I even enjoy the moments more when I am awake and the kids are still asleep. So maybe it's also the first half hour of the day so that I can relax, think through what's going to happen and mentally prepare myself and get ready.
To have that moment of rest before the hectic day starts.
Yeah.
That's nice. What is the weirdest food that you've ever eaten?
The weirdest food? Wow. I think I was with a friend on a trip to Greece and she was there for professional reasons, and I didn't know until we were there that she told them I was there for professional reasons as well. So I had to pretend to be a journalist, and I'm a very bad liar, so that was weird. And then we were at a press dinner, and so the locals there wanted us to try octopus tentacles, and and there was like no way of getting out of that. So we smiled and we just tasted that. And I think that would be, that was my weirdest food.
And what was it like?
It's so funny, but if your mind is so busy worrying about what you're eating, you can hardly even taste it. So I just remember feeling with my tongue, oh, here are those little nabs. This is just weird. Okay, let's pretend it's nice. I don't want to offend these people. So I wouldn't even be able to tell you.
Okay, so you were a really good Dutch ambassador for not being mean to anyone by saying no to the food.
Yeah, I think I was. Yeah.
Well done. If you could pick up a new skill in an instant, what would it be?
Oh, wow. I think the first thing that comes to mind is snowboarding.
Okay.
It looks so nice, and I've been on skis just for once. It was not a great success. I'm a horrible sporter anyways, like in general. So, yeah, just the outdoor idea. Yeah.
It looks pretty cool, I have to say.
Yeah, it does, right? Yeah, and it's in the sunshine, it's outside. The only thing is that most Dutch people go on snowboard holidays when we have other things to celebrate here in my country. So that would be difficult. Would be Christmas, probably.
That's right. You need to find the right time so you don't miss your own holidays.
Yes.
Okay, another question for you. What's your children's favorite bedtime story?
Oh, that's nice. I think it's gonna be the whole repertoire of a Dutch a book writer who's been my inspiration since I was a kid. Her name was Annie M.G. Schmid, and I think her most famous work was about two kids who just experienced all kinds of adventures, and they were pretty naughty kids. They tried out everything that I'd only dream about doing, like cutting their own hair and baking their own weird stuff in the kitchen when their mom was out. So I think it would be Jip and Janneke.
I think my personal favorite from this particular writer is actually Pluck from the Pet.
Yeah, it was choosing between those. Yeah.
But Jip and Janneke are pretty nice. Cool. This one is because you're a feedback researcher. So what's been the best piece of advice that you have ever been given?
I think the best advice I got from my daily supervisor when I was doing my own PhD was that she constantly reminded me about that doing a PhD is more about the journey of becoming an independent and self-aware researcher rather than writing a book with 4 publishable articles in my field, because I was very product focused when I started my PhD. I was like, okay, I'm here to do my studies and to write 4 papers. And along the way, she just kept informing me, it's about you becoming a researcher. And that was it was priceless advice. And I'm happy she persisted in saying the same thing every time.
All right, thanks for sharing that advice. I can't wait to hear more about your PhD journey, but let me start at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, I have to ask, how did you actually go from acting to the university and then from musicology to educational science?
Sometimes I wonder myself, but it actually does make sense, because I think it was just my kid's dream to be an actress. So I was in the acting club in my high school, and then I did the preparatory training in Utrecht, and I auditioned at several follow-up studies, but I got rejected. And then it was like, oh my gosh, in terms of feedback, that was kind of hard to take in. And then I needed to find myself a plan B. And for me, it was important. I didn't want to do a study with big numbers of students, because I was already interested in psychology or pedagogy, but there was just such large numbers of particularly girls who were doing that. And yeah, for me, I just wanted to do something that felt a little bit more special. So that when I found the Bachelor of Musicology program, I was like, yeah, it's still related somewhat to my plan A to become an actress. And there were only 30 first-year students. So I was like, yeah, this is going to be my thing. but it actually wasn't. And my music teacher already told me, he said, it's dull for you. It's not exciting enough. It's just theory. There's no stage. I'm happy I persisted anyway, because I think I went there to meet the love of my life, my now husband and father of my children. So I can never say I regret making that choice. But I think during the first year already, I realized, okay, this is not really my thing, but I'm not really a quitter. So I wanted to finish the program, but in the meantime, I was looking for something to do on the side, actually. And then on a website, I saw this educational program that was educational sciences. And I remember just running downstairs to my mom and saying, this study was here all along. How is it possible? It hasn't crossed my path yet. And I just registered. I didn't read up on anything or went to any introduction day. I knew it was going to be it. And it was again, love at first sight, but then it was with the content.
How did you know that this was going to be it? What was in these studies that attracted you to it?
Yeah, I think in the introduction text on the website, I saw there was something like, what makes you like the one teacher and dislike the other one? And how come one teacher can catch your attention and really interest you and another one doesn't? Have you ever thought about why your educational books are designed the way they are? And I was like, yes, these are questions I've asked myself. Are there answers to them? Is it like a field to study these things? And I think I'm brought up in an educational family, so a lot of uncles and aunts and my father are in education, but I just didn't consider becoming a teacher, because then you'd have to pick one field. So that would have been a music teacher, but I wasn't good enough on an instrument. So I think in a bigger picture, it does make sense in hindsight that I ended up being interested in education as well.
It was in your blood.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
All right, and then you chose to do what we call in the Netherlands a research master. And they are usually harder to get into than a regular master program, and they're meant to be trained in research and then continue with a PhD. Was that also the case for you? Did you choose to do the research master because you knew you wanted to pursue a PhD?
Yeah. So when I started the educational science program, which I combined with musicology for the first year and a half, and there was the first statistics course, and everybody was frustrated, and I was like super excited. I thought, oh yes, I really missed doing calculations in musicology, because it's really more of a history study, and in music theory there were some calculations going on, and I love the idea that you ask a question and there is one correct answer. You do a statistical test, and we have set rules as a community, as a scientific community about them. And so I love the feeling of control that the numbers give you. So my teacher in the statistics course, he said, okay, this is really not average that people get so excited. And I wanted to get a 100% score in the test, because I thought, well, it's possible. I mean, the answers are, you can calculate them. I could get a 100%. And she said in the first year already, you might consider doing a research master, which was then a quite new program. So it was not really well known at that point. And she told me about it, and I talked to the coordinator of the master. And he was also very excited, and so was I. So I think in the third month of the program there, I already decided, yes, this is going to be my path.
So the university was very excited to find a student who actually liked doing this kind of research and working with statistics.
Yeah.
And you were excited about finding a program that was then catered towards what you wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like a win-win.
Yes, it really was. I'm still very happy also with my teacher so proactively telling me, wow, this is exceptional, and you should really think about this.
All right. And then what was it like to write an MA thesis about master thesis supervision? And why did you choose that particular topic?
Yeah, it's so multi-layered, right? Sometimes felt like a Drost effect that because you're talking about supervision, but at the same time I was being supervised, obviously. So the master program was a 2-year program, and the second year was fully in the light of your master's thesis, writing your own master's thesis. But at the end of the first year, I saw a vacancy for a PhD position, which was on master's thesis supervision. And I saw the vacancy and I remember thinking, oh no, this is not going to happen. This is such an interesting PhD position, but it's 1 year too early for me because I have to finish up my own master next year. And again, I discussed it with the program coordinator and he said, give it a try. Just apply and you'll see what happens. Because I think when you're in this program, you're so well trained to be a PhD student, they might be interested after all. So I applied and I got the position. So the theme was set. I mean, it was about master thesis supervision. And I was like, I'm crazy about doing research. So I'm also crazy about students learning how to do research. It made complete sense to me.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about your own experiences with your supervisor while writing about supervision?
Yeah, it's so funny because in the end, I had 3 supervisors.
Okay.
So one was from my master's program, and 2 were from the department at which the PhD position was, because those were in different departments, and they were very culturally different groups also. So they had different ways of looking at working life, different journals that they were interested in, and mainly also different sphere of how hard you should be working, the sacrifices you should be making for wanting to be a researcher. And sometimes I did struggle with it, but yeah, at the same time, it was nice that I could see 2 ways of dealing with being a researcher and then finding my own way of what fitted with me. And I think one of my supervisors, she was not really into the meta dialogue. So when I tried to talk about our own supervision process, she was always a bit like, no, that's soft. Let's talk about your papers. And that was sometimes very confusing because I was like, but this is what my papers are about. If you would not be interested in talking about it in our own situation, then who actually am I writing these papers for? So the other 2 were way more open to this meta dialogue.
All right. And then what advice would you give our listeners when choosing a supervisor and in how to deal with a supervisor who then comes up with very different ideas than maybe a second or third supervisor?
Yeah. So I think in our country, it's less common that you choose your own supervisor. Usually supervisors have opened positions that you can apply to. So I'm not so familiar with choosing your own supervisor. So, and it's difficult because I see these tweets sometimes as well of students asking for advice, but should we discuss in our first conversation? I'm like, yeah, wow, in one conversation, that's so difficult to tick off all the things that you would need to know to make sure there's a proper fit. But I do think work ethics and the expectations on that side and expectations of a dissertation and expectations of a frequency of meetings, for instance, I think those are pretty important. And if there's a possibility, I would definitely talk to some of their prior students to hear what their experiences are, how susceptible they are for feedback on their own supervision practices, for instance. Because I think having a dialogue both ways about how things are going really helps.
Okay, that sounds like good advice. And you said that you saw a lot of these questions on Twitter, where you have an account under a different name, right? Do you want to tell me more about that?
Yeah.
Is that a project that you're doing on the side, or is it related to your research?
Yeah, it was a bit on the side. I had some physical setbacks, so I wasn't able to work that much, but I felt like my work energy was still just like in my head. I just wanted to engage with colleagues. And I became more active on Twitter. And then I decided just to make an account just dedicated to research supervision. Because I think there's a lot of discussions and interaction going on in the academic Twitter community. And I just wanted to share some positive vibes. As you said in the introduction, it's really because I think a lot of students struggle with them. So it's not to cover it up, but mainly that I think there is a need for some more positivity. And my mission now in a paper that I'm writing and also with the Twitter account is to also try and give very small pieces of advice to PhD students or master students on what they can do to contribute to a well-working feedback dialogue with their supervisor. And I mean, I know there's toxic PIs and then it won't matter. Whatever you do as a student, you won't get through to them. But I think there are some small tips and tricks that can help you to open up a conversation with them on difficult topics.
All right, I've checked it out a little bit and I'm following you on Twitter. I'm also on Twitter next to our podcast account, which I want everyone to follow. And it has given me exactly what you're saying because of these small pieces of advice in 120 characters or maybe a little bit more here and there. Very simple tips, but that maybe even reassure me that if I would do it this way, then maybe at least I'm working on it towards a better relationship that you then have with a supervisor or a PI. You just mentioned the term a toxic PI. What is that exactly?
Yeah, when I think about my own PhD project, I interviewed several supervisors, and I remember one of them saying, he said, because I asked, how do you differ your supervision strategies based on the students that you have in front of you? And he was very firm, like, no, I'm the supervisor. I do it my way. It's up to the student to adapt to me or to any other teacher that they encounter. That's life. I do it this way, period. And I do think he had the best intentions, as I truly believe most people have. But I think if you're so, I don't know, like stubborn in your own perspective, that has a high chance of being perceived as toxic, at least. Because I think interaction between people in any situation, also if there's a hierarchy of you being a supervisor and someone else being the supervisee, there has to be two-way communication about how can we make this thing work. And I think those who are really strong-willed in wanting it to be a one-way street, I really hope the next generation of academics, those who are now postdocs or PhD students or beginning assistant professors, that it's a new generation of people who are going to do things differently.
I hope so too.
Yeah, and then I really feel like that's the happy PhD supervisor. I'm like, we are the new generation. Let's do this. We can do this.
All right, let's take the lead.
Yeah.
I've been speaking to quite a few young researchers about how academia seems to be all about rejection. And I feel this is also something that comes back in this toxic PI, right? Like this person is basically rejecting your ideas because he wants you to adapt to his or her ideas.
Yeah.
And then there's, of course, always rejection of a grant application, of research positions, of article publications. So as a feedback researcher, how do you think people in their early stage career can learn to deal with rejection or negative feedback?
Yeah, I think there's expectation management. So if I think about the students that I now supervise myself, I share with them when my papers are rejected, which also happens all the time, I would almost say, so that they know it's not about them. And I had one professor in my department, and I really looked up to him. He was like the founding father of our whole department. And he said, Renske, in my whole career, it happened to me just once that I got an article back and they said, it's brilliant, we're gonna place it. Once. And it helped me, so I think expectation management will help so that it is not about you. And sometimes it is a lottery and it depends on who your reviewers are and what their interests are and what their publications are on, and if you have luckily cited them or not. So I think the other part is celebrate small wins. So and I think I was so proud of one of my students last week because she had her first paper rejected, which was not nice. So we submitted to another journal and we worked on the manuscript based on the feedback she got. And now it was sent out for review. And we really, celebrated it. We were like, yes, this is a step further than you were at the first submission. It's a good sign. we've progressed. Let's see what happens now. So breaking things up in smaller pieces, other than the end goal of a publication, or the actually getting the grant, can help.
All right, I'll cheer to that. I hope she gets in this time.
Yeah, so do I.
So, as young researchers, we're dealing with rejection, and also something that I've seen coming up a lot lately is the imposter syndrome.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I shared on my Twitter account a Dutch song on the imposter syndrome, which I just really fell in love with. And one of my colleagues, she really encouraged me to try and translate it. And I did so, and I contacted the original performance, and they're now really considering to record it in English. So I really hope that I can share the English version of the song sometime soon to support our Twitter community struggling with the imposter syndrome as well.
That sounds great. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, me too.
I think the way to deal with that imposter syndrome is very different for everyone, very personal. And one way of coping for me is going to the gym 5 times a week.
Yeah.
Especially kickbox gets some frustration out of me. And I know that you have maintained your passion for music through conducting a children's choir, which sounds great. Do you have any tips on how to not lose yourself in the PhD and the research and the successes, but maintain hobbies and other things in life that are important to make you enjoy life?
Yeah. I think it is so important to have something else that's, not academically related per se. So for me, it was also the conducting during my my time as a PhD student. And the thing is that I think as a PhD student, I even managed my time better, because then no one was dependent on me. I knew this is what I'm doing for me, and I set my goals and my standards. And my goal for now is working 40 hours a week and going home when the clock hits like 5 or 5:30. And I think I managed to do so pretty well. I struggle with it more now that other students are dependent on my input, for instance. So for me, really, the conducting was very helpful, because it's a complete different energy when you're in front of a group of children singing on top of their lungs, preferably. So for me, that really helped. And, spending time with friends and family and trying to really be tight on not using your weekends for work. Because the thing is, when you're writing your PhD thesis, it's never done, never. And there's always this other thing you could have added. So it's so difficult to draw the line somewhere. So maybe that would be my main advice. Make sure where your line is and try and draw it. Communicate it to others so that they know they can help you to protect it.
Right. In case, so that you don't actually get a burnout for just keep going and going and going endlessly.
Yeah, it's such a pitfall. Yeah.
You need weekends or evenings off, right?
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Also let it go just a little bit.
Yeah, but then sometimes it feels as if like it's so easy to say these things, but if you're in a lab or in a research group which has a complete different research culture, it's so much more difficult to manage this. So I think I feel for those who are in these situations, who are passionate about the content of their studies, but are in a culture where it's just less accepted when you are strict on your working hours.
And maybe more competitive, so you feel like you have to keep going to be part of the game.
Yeah. But when all the others do so, yeah.
So is there anything we can think of as advice for people who are in such a culture?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. So I hope they find some support in the academic Twitter community as a whole, because I think the attention for self-care and mental health are really good. I feel it's a warm community out there. So and try and be the next generation. Talk about it with peers or find other peers who feel the same way in other labs, for instance. But it is difficult.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot before too, that we actually need peers who feel the same way or are in a similar situation. Whereas if you're a master's student and you're taking classes, you meet people automatically.
Yeah.
But when you're doing a PhD, you do it at home a lot. And especially the corona situation has shown that people are not made to work alone at home all the time, which for PhD students until now was very normal.
Yeah. I tell my students now, I say, the rates of PhD students not finishing their projects is already pretty high. And I mean, different studies show that PhD students feel lonely and find it a lonely journey. I mean, these circumstances at this moment in the world, it would almost be weird if you would not feel lonely and frustrated and are struggling with your motivation at some point in these circumstances. It's really tough.
So the first step is to open a Twitter account, which is just one click away.
Yeah.
And see who else is out there.
Yeah, connect.
Great, exactly. Then I've actually already come to my last question, which is always about the afterlife of the PhD. What is your next project and what are you going to do with that?
Haha, nice. My next project, or actually my current project, is that I'm writing a paper on how to ask for feedback, and which is actually also a call for teachers to address this with their students and their PhD students. So, because I really think there's a lot to win in feedback processes, because also for feedback, we've very long seen this as information that is being sent from someone to someone. And we were mostly thinking about the sending part. So what's effective feedback, and then we think about the timing of when the information is sent and the proportion of positive and negative comments. And now there's really this change going on in feedback research that's like, oh, wait a minute. Feedback is effective only if the receiver understands it, accepts it, and feels motivated to use it. So I think if we prepare and instruct students better how to use their feedback, how and when to ask for feedback, what would be good feedback questions and what feedback questions could you better avoid. I'm really passionate about moving this line forward and finishing up the paper that I'm writing about it, and then making some online modules for students to work through to actually learn these skills.
So another skill that universities could be teaching students in, for example, these research masters, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. I would be looking forward to that article.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to share it. Yeah.
All right, I'll cheer to that then.
Yes.
Before I move on to a few last short questions.
Great.
Okay. What was the most important conference that you've been to?
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, I feel such a researcher. So in my mind, it's like, okay, importance in terms of what? But I think the most impressive one was when I went to the AERA for the first time. It's the yearly conference of the American Association for Educational Research. And I'm not a fan of traveling a lot. I just really like my hometown and my home country. So going to America was already quite a big step. And it was so big. There's thousands of educational researchers. And at first I felt a bit lost. I was like, whoa, I'm such a small piece of this big thing here. But the interesting thing was that there was this one person, and I'd already seen him in a couple of sessions, and at some point we recognized each other, like, hey, you again. And then we started a conversation, and then it appeared we had already been in contact through email, because he was also doing feedback research. And then it completely changed my mind about being such a small part, like which made no sense to me on such a big conference. But then I realized, no, there's a lot of subgroups within this bigger picture, and it really represented academia as a whole to me. There's so many people involved in doing research, and we all try to fit small pieces to the same big puzzle. And I really liked that. Yeah.
Where was that? You said in the US?
I think it was in Denver.
All right. And that was the first time in the US because you like your hometown more.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of conferences in the Netherlands too, right?
Yeah, there are very interesting things. Yeah. And my imposter syndrome then tells me you're not a real deal of an academic because you don't travel and you haven't been studying abroad, and so that's a conversation I sometimes have in my mind, and then I talk back and I say, no, you can connect to others over the world other ways.
Exactly. I think so too. Have you received a scholarship?
No, and I haven't applied to any. So in Holland, there are some scholarships for young researchers. And at my former department, there was quite a big push that you had to try and apply for, it's called a VENI. But I decided not to do so. And that was also a decision of not joining that rat race. That price was too high because I knew it would take up all my weekends and evenings to work on it, because I'd seen it for other young researchers, and I decided, no, that's not the price I'm going to pay.
It was too much work for what you might or most likely not actually get.
Yeah, and I didn't have my good idea at that moment. It came a few years later that I was like, yes, now I really found my topic and my thing.
It was too early, too.
Yeah.
All right. What do you consider to be your most important contribution to your field?
Oh, I really think it's going to be this paper that I'm now working on.
It sounded like a good one.
Yeah, it was rejected for the first time and I got really good feedback. So I'm about to resubmit to another journal, but it feels like this is the paper of my life so far. Yeah, so I really hope that it'll be published and that I can share it with others, because I'm populent, to say it in Dutch. I can't wait.
Nice, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Who has impressed you most with what they have accomplished?
Yeah, I think it would be the person I look up to the most at this point. It's a researcher from the UK. Her name is Naomi Winstone. And when I first read a paper she wrote in 2017, up until then I hadn't heard of her. And I was reading the paper and it was so good and eloquently written and respectful to the paper she was referring to. And she has such good ideas and she's such a nice person. And it was the first time I wrote to someone that I just didn't know, like, oh my God, I'm really your fan. What a brilliant paper. Thank you so much for your work and the inspiration I got from it. And it really ended up being a nice conversation on the way. And now we're trying to look for ways to collaborate. And I don't know, it feels as if I would recognize her papers without seeing her name, because they're so good and inspirational to me. And I really like to have female researchers to look up to, because it helps me.
I second that.
Yeah.
And then my last question of today is, how do you relax after a hard day of work?
Yeah, good question. And it is changing, actually, because last week, for the first time, rather than doing yoga or taking a walk, I put on my running shoes for the first time since, I think, like 6 years. And I noticed it really helped me even better to get to more be into my body and out of my head. And I think so physical activity in general would be what works for me. Or singing. Yeah.
Do you get to sing a lot at home?
I try to do so, because I'm not conducting anymore. So now I try to sing with my 2 kids. And I don't sing that much when they're in bed in the evenings. So I try to fit it in on daily hours. Yeah, but it helps me as well to really clear my mind. And also to reprioritize. When I come out of writing, then that is the important thing in my life. And I can only think about when is the first moment I can get back to writing. And I really need to get out of that mindset to be present in my personal life with my kids.
Which is also very
way more important. But I find it sometimes I struggle with making the switch.
Understandably. All right. Well, thank you again, Renske, for joining me today. I think we touched upon some very important things, and I'll definitely take on some of your feedback and tips. I'd also like to thank our listeners. Don't forget to follow us and Renske on Twitter, and find her by searching for Happy PhD Supervisor. You have to also tell me more about your children's book that you just released about Corona. What is it about exactly? And I'm also curious who did the illustrations.
Yeah, well, at first I was just thinking, my kids won't have active memories from this period, because they are 2 and 4-year-old, so they won't remember. While this period is also very intense for them and confusing. Why can't we visit Grandpa and Grandma? Why can't we go to our favorite theme park, the Efteling? Those kind of questions. And I thought, I want to record something of their experiences. So, when in 10 years we still talk about this period, I'm positive that we still be talking about what's happening now. And they won't remember. I just wanted to write it down. And as I said, I'm a really big fan of Annemieke Schmid, who wrote a lot of, rhymes for children. And then I thought, maybe I could put it in rhyme, their experiences And it went so fluently, just, it walked out of my pen. And I was like, I think this is also interesting for other kids, So my mommy friends, I asked them, I said, hey, I'm writing this. What do you think? Does it apply to your kids? And they were very enthusiastic. And just one of my best friends said, if you're going to make this a children's book, I can do the illustration. And it was on my bucket list since forever. And I was like, let's do it. Also to have some positive vibes, in this really strange period. My dad just got out of the hospital with Corona. It was a really intense period and I wanted to have something positive to spend my time on. So I just did it, and now they're all sold out. So there were 300 books. They were sold out in a week, and the week got 300 more, and now I'm out of them. So it was such a great experience. Yeah.
Beautiful. You should send me a copy and maybe put in a pack of hagelslag and stroopwafels.
Yeah, really Dutch pack.